Oh, good, you're on time.
Yes, I definitely tried to. Where's Allison?
I don't know, but we should probably get started handing these out so that we start on time. There you go. I wonder where she is.
Hey guys, I'm sorry I'm so late. It all started last night. I was up super late and some guy just came by.
You can just help me pass these out. It's okay, don't worry about it.
This presentation's really got me stressed out, there's been a lot going on this week and I just don't know if I can handle it.
You know, it's okay. I think we have something that might be able to help you. So, I'm Avery,
I'm Allie.
And I'm Allison.
and we're AAA, and we are here to help you learn about Habit 3 and effective time management. So, go ahead and
So we're just going to start with a few questions. So how many of you use a planner for like your day-to-day activities that you have to get done? Okay. How many of you sit down at the beginning of every week and look at your week and prioritize things? Okay. So not as many of you, that's okay. How many of you feel like you lack the inability to organize, prioritize, or just don't have any discipline? Okay, thanks for being honest. Covey says that he thinks most people would respond to that question and say that they don't have the ability to be disciplined, but he thinks this is wrong and that people really don't have the ability to prioritize. So when I was reading his chapter, I realized that I coincidentally planned my planner in the way that he references as the quadrants. So you might do the same thing and not know it, so Avery's going to go into the quadrants a little bit more.
Yeah, so basically there's 4 quadrants, and they range on a scale of urgent to not urgent, and then kind of important to not as important. So quadrant 1 is both urgent and important. So these are tasks that have to be done in a timely fashion and are important to complete. Now, quadrant 2 is more important, but not as urgent. So there are things that should be done, things that you might really need to do, but don't have as much of a time frame as to when exactly they have to be done by, so you can spend a little bit more time working on these important tasks. Now, quadrant 3 is urgent, but not important. So a lot of people get quadrant 1 and quadrant 3 confused because they may deem something important that might not actually be important. So that is where being able to decipher between an important and unimportant task is really helpful. And quadrant 4 is neither important nor urgent. So really the things that should be left until you don't have to do anything else that is in the way, that's important, or anything like that. So kind of a definition of urgent is it needs immediate attention and it is going to accomplish someone else's goal. So not dealing with these causes immediate issues. And something that is important are responsibilities that will help you accomplish your own goals. So for some examples of the quadrants, Allison will tell you more about them.
So if you're anything like me, you read the quadrants and went 1, 2, and 3 sound exactly the same, and I'm not exactly sure how to decipher those. So I'm just going to give some examples that help me kind of like place my life into it. So quadrant 1 again is important and urgent. So so he describes it as like crisis, pressing problems, and deadline-driven projects. So for me, that's the paper that's like 50% of my grade due next week. That's super urgent. It's important for my grade and success in the class. Quadrant 2 is not urgent but important. So this is more, as they explained it, the relationship building, recreation, and recognizing new activities. For me, that's calling my mom. Very important. She needs to know that I'm still alive, and if you know my mom, she needs that call. But it's not necessarily urgent. I don't have to do it every hour of the day. Quadrant 3, it's urgent but not important. So this is, he explains some calls, sometimes mail, meetings, this could be like at work or school, and popular activities. So for me, I thought going to a talk on campus, it's urgent because it's happening, but it's not necessarily important, like it's not going to drastically affect what happens. I mean, unless it's a life-changing speech, won't drastically affect if I don't go. And the last quadrant, quadrant 4, is not urgent and not important. This was the easiest one for me to identify because I feel like we're all guilty of this. Instagram, time fillers, those don't need to be done, but you do them anyways. That could even be like walking on the beach or laying down, relaxing. So with all that said, I'm going to talk a little bit about independent will, which is the 4th in human endowment, according to Covey, following self-awareness, imagination, and conscience. So this 4th endowment makes self-management possible, which is kind of what Covey wants us to come to realize in this 3rd habit. So effective management is putting the first things first. So it's really prioritizing. If you are an effective manager of yourself, your discipline comes from within. So it's very self-motivated, and it is a function of your independent will. And with that, Ali's going to explain the emphasis on the quadrants.
So Covey places a very large emphasis on quadrant 2 in this chapter, and has the idea of becoming a self-manager, which means you think of your personal mission statement, things you want to be remembered for, that you kind of developed in habit 2, and you prioritize and organize around those aspects of your life, making those the priorities. Those are what's important rather than urgent, and that's what you want to focus around. And the idea that he gives this is that it creates an idea of sound principles that you are focusing your life on. And one of the major ways that you can focus on quadrant 2 tasks is by saying no to quadrant 3 or 4 tasks. And I have a hard time saying no to things. I'm sure some of you do too. But he gives an example of you're spending time with someone. Maybe you're having quality time with a friend or a parent that's in town, but then you get a phone call. And a lot of people would then think that phone call is something urgent, task 1, because you have a limited amount of time to answer the call. You don't know why they're calling, but he would dismiss that idea and say that no, your priority at that point is the person that you're with, not the phone call. So that's an example of saying no to something in quadrant 3 or 4, though there are exceptions. There's emergency phone calls that happen. But sometimes you have to say no to 3 and 4 so that you can focus and be a good self-manager on things in quadrant 2. He gives 6 criteria for being able to focus on quadrant 2. Coherence, balance, simply a quadrant 2 focus, a people dimension, flexibility, and portability. So now that we've kind of given you a brief understanding of this, we're going to have you practice. So you'll see 3 blank bullet points on your paper, and we want you to think of 3 goals or tasks that you have for the next week, and simply write them out. So we'll give you a little bit of time to do that. Give you just like 30 more seconds.
So as you're wrapping that up, you can go ahead and flip to the back page and look at where you might think to place them, what bullet points best fit on that pamphlet. And you're just gonna
So you should see a part that says like must do. So those are more quadrant 1. They're urgent. They're important. There's a section that's labeled should do, so that's more quadrant 2. You should get them done, they're important, but you don't have as many time constraints. And then events might be like a quadrant 3 or 4 thing, not super urgent, maybe not important. So just kind of organize as far as the quadrants go, where you think your events and things that you have to get done should go. So I'll give you a little bit of time for that.
Feel free to add more things into this too, rather than your 3 major bullet points.
Alright, well, how do you kind of start wrapping those out?
How was that? Was that easy? Hard? Did it require a lot of thinking?
Does anybody notice that they have a ton of things in one quadrant versus the other 3?
Yeah, there are things in my list too.
Yeah.
Should be.
Alright. So if there's any questions about the quadrants or anything at this time? No? Yes? Dan?
How do you deal with sometimes the fatigue of feeling like everything is in quadrant 1 and all you're ever doing is quadrant 1?
So that comes into play of really understanding whether it is super duper important or whether it is something that you could potentially put off just a little bit and kind of organizing by importance and urgency. But yes, it is kind of difficult and a little bit overwhelming to have everything in just one quadrant. So it's kind of finding those spaces where you could have a little bit of leeway in one thing versus the other.
I think even Jenna, going back to habit 1, looking at that, the circle, concern, what was it? Concern and then influence or vice versa. Looking at those and realizing what, is it actually something that's like in your influence or concern?
So kind of stemming off that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how habit 1 and 2 are necessary for habit 3. So going back to habit 1 and 2, we understand that we are creators and we develop a sense of self-awareness and the ability to look at our own paradigms in habit 1, and then we progress into habit 2, where we have an ability to create mentally, we're able to have an imagination, and we are able to kind of step into our own proactiveness. And with those capabilities, then we can move into creating physically, having our own independent will, and being able to have a principle-centered behavior of understanding what is in our control, what is out of our control, and being proactive about getting things done, what we want our lives to look like, and apply those to being able to organize and manage your time in a very effective way. So, that was it.
So to tie it all together, one thing that Covey does is he quotes an essay he read from E.M. Gray titled "The Common Denominator of Success," and through the essay he found out that one factor that transcends all of the rest was that the people who are successful put first things first. So again, like what we have talked about, is prioritizing is huge. You prioritize around the essentials to get the essentials done, and when it comes down to it, like once those are done, you can do what you needed to do in 2 and 3, and maybe even 4 if you have like that extra spare time. All this is really helpful to make you an effective manager and really like independent in your own way, like self-managing independence. Yeah. With that, any questions?
We kind of wrestled a lot with the idea that he places more emphasis on quadrant 2 than quadrant 1. We didn't really know how to look at that, because when something's urgent, you kind of think that should be the first thing that's done. But we all kind of felt that he was saying quadrant 2 comes before that. So we didn't know how to deal with that in a sense. And maybe it's a given that quadrant 1 is done, and then you move into prioritizing quadrant 2. Or maybe you think about what's important to you, and then circulate around that. So,
One thing that helped me was when I was reading about quadrant 2, it reminded me of habit 2 and your long-term goals, and how when I wrote out my long-term goals, they were not what I was stressing out about right now. What I was stressing out about was the urgent quadrant 1, and so I feel like that's kind of where I saw his, I don't know, like your long-term goals in quadrant 2 are a little bit, for me, more correlated than I thought.
Do you guys think that you could really implement this habit into your own lives and have it work for you?
I think I would struggle with a calendar. I could probably show you all the planners that I've bought and not filled out, like with intention of using and then not using. So I think that's probably the thing I would struggle with most, is sitting down and doing that.
Have you found any like substitutes on how to do that, or like do you put it in your phone or anything? All by memory.
A little bit in the phone.
Yeah.
If it's an appointment or something, but somehow.
Make it work.
yeah, I like this idea because it's beyond just the appointments, and you use like Google Calendar. It's those big urgent things. If I have to go to the doctor's this day, I have to work this day. But this kind of implements other things that are important to you and what you want to prioritize in your life and your personal mission. So I encourage you all to kind of implement that if you can, so you can focus on your mission more than just the tasks that you need to get done. So there's no
I've got a question.
Okay.
Allison, you mentioned that sitting on the beach is a quadrant 4 activity. How can it become a quadrant 2 activity?
How could it become a quadrant 2?
No, sorry.
I have 2.
No class. Well, like actual. I know we're trying to find phrasing.
Really? I'm sorry. Being bad.
Who here likes money? I do too. So today, we guarantee that you will walk out of this room richer than you were when you came in. I'm Caitlin,
I'm Amanda.
and today we are going to be talking about the paradigms of interdependence.
So we all know what banks are, right? We're all adults, we have to adult, we make deposits, we make withdrawals, so we're very familiar with banks. But we're not exactly going to talk about that kind of bank as we're thinking. We're going to be talking about the emotional bank account. It is a metaphor that describes the trust you have built in a relationship. It's, in a way, the feeling of safeness you have with another human being. This can apply to any relationship, parent, child, student, teacher, any kind of relationship. So in these relationships, to make deposits, you have to build on actions revolving around kindness and honesty, just to name a few, because over time these build up a reserve of trust. And these are important because if it's built on a strong relationship, then the trust is deeper and higher. And these take time, so it can't happen overnight. It requires effort and genuinity. And if these are not put in with effort, your emotional bank account could be overdrawn because the trust is not there. And so Kaylin is going to start off with, we have 6 major deposits that we hope that you guys can contribute to building relationships in your life.
Yes, so all of you in front have slips of paper like this, so you can take them and turn them around. And you'll notice that there are 6 deposit slips, and each one of them has one of the deposits that we will be talking about. So what Amanda and I are going to do is go through each deposit and give a brief overview of what it is, and then we're going to give you some time to just turn it over and write how you can specifically apply this in your life. So the more specific you are of the way that you can apply this is better for you guys, because then you can really take it and absorb it into your life and find specific ways that you can implement it. So we're going to begin with the first deposit, which is understanding the individual. So there's a quote that Covey gives on page 191 that I just want to read because I think it is really important and it sums it up so well. So he writes, "What is important to another person must be as important to you as the other person is to you." And I think that really sums up this point well, in that you have to be intentional about understanding another person. And that can be really easier said than done. And it can be really hard to not project your own views onto what you think another person should be or what they're thinking, but to just really sit there and take in who the other person is and understand them for all that they are. So I'll give an example just so you know what to do, but we're going to give you a little bit of time just to flip it over, and on the back, write down a specific way you can use this in your life, so maybe how you can implement this for a specific friendship that you have, or you can write down a way that you have seen this interact in your life before. So for example, I know that my closest friends are my closest friends because I feel like they understand me the best and they really accept me for who I am and don't place any judgment on that. So I would write down on the back ways that I feel when I know that I feel understood by those friendships. So we're going to give you some time. Now you can do that. Yes.
So is it something that we feel like when we're understood, or is it things that you can do to make someone else feel understood?
I think it can be either. So if you can find a way to implement it in your life now, I think that's better. But if you can't think of something off the top of your head, then maybe write a way that you felt or how it made you feel in instances in the past.
Do you have an extra set map?
Okay, we're gonna have a few more seconds, but final thoughts. So the second major deposit is attending to the little things. We've probably all heard this, it's probably very cliche, but it's cliche because it is very important and that's why it is very well known. Small acts of kindness go a longer way than we may think, because it can have a huge impact on the person you're doing this act for, whether that is a compliment, "I like your shoes," or "I hope you have a great day today," or just helping them out with something. So the takeaway for this is the little things are the big things, and you never know how much of an impact a simple, even sometimes nonchalant action towards someone can mean for them.
So go ahead and you can write the second one down. seconds to wrap up any final thoughts. The third deposit that Covey talks about is keeping commitments. Something that I found really interesting was he stressed the importance of making this a habit, and habits are formed by repetition. And so by repeating or repeatedly keeping commitments and promises to other people, you are in a way building a trust in that relationship. And also I think that when you keep commitments and promises to other people, it is reciprocated back to you, and in the way that the bond of trust just continues to form and to flourish as well. So I appreciate the fact that he included this as one of the deposits, because I think that it really is valuable, especially when you do make sure to make it a habit in your life. So I'll give you guys some time to write down ways that you can keep commitments or specific ways you see this in your life.
Few more seconds. So the fourth major deposit is clarifying expectations. That awkwardness in the room you feel, because we all know what that's like and how hard that can be, I feel it too. This can happen with a new romantic relationship, whether or if you're a boss to an employee or teacher to student. This is tricky because assumptions are made most of the time, and this can further hinder trust, and miscommunication occurs a lot. And relationship difficulties are sadly rooted in this a lot because of the conflicting expectations about roles and goals within that relationship. This usually occurs because one usually assumes their expectations that it's assumed by the other, so that's where the miscommunication happens. So to avoid this, as hard as it may be, make expectations clear in the beginning. It saves a lot of long-term consequences, more miscommunication, and hindrance of trust, and that's how you can build your reserve on depositing trust within that relationship. So again, on your slips, you can write down a few ways that may help you make expectations clear in the beginning. And this can be in a new relationship of any kind or even a current one.
The fifth major deposit that Covey mentions is showing personal integrity. Something I appreciate is the distinguishment between integrity and honesty. So Covey says that honesty is conforming our words to reality, but integrity is conforming our reality to our words. And honestly, the first time I read that, I was like, wait, what? So I had to read it again, and I'm glad he kind of clarified that, and he said that it's fulfilling promises and keeping expectations. And I also appreciate that it was stressed that integrity is treating everyone on the same set of principles, and to also be loyal to others even when they're not around. So in my mind, it goes to show that honesty and integrity are quite different, even though they're used quite synonymously in our day-to-day life. And it shows that integrity is so much more valuable and so much more than just honesty. So you can go ahead and take a couple seconds to just write down ways that you can be more than honest. You can have integrity in relationships.
more seconds for final thoughts. Finally, the sixth, and I think for me personally, the most difficult one is apologizing sincerely. I actually did this morning for someone that I've known for many years, and I hurt them many years ago, and that was really hard. And it is hard because it requires a great amount of character strength and security to do it genuinely. And it's also very difficult because when you apologize, you're very vulnerable. And at least for me, I also feel weak when I do that. So a lot of times when people apologize, it's not as sincere because they feel like they have to. It's obligatory. So when you apologize, if at all, which you should, make it genuine and 100% sincere, and that it comes from your heart and not obligation. And sincere apologies, it creates a great deposit of trust, and the relationship definitely reflects that. So on your sheets you can write down maybe if it's a person you may feel that you need to do this, or ways to help you apologize genuinely and sincerely and from the heart.
Perfect. We are going to conclude our time together. If you look at your handout, you can see how there is an arrow of all of the 6 deposits going into your emotional bank, and you may be wondering what you can get out of the emotional bank. And to sum it up, Covey has a quote in his book that I think he can word better than I ever could, so I'm going to read that out loud. He says, "When we make deposits of unconditional love, when we live the primary laws of love, we encourage others to live the primary laws of life. When we truly love others without condition, without strings, we help them feel secure and safe and validated and affirmed in their essential worth, identity, and integrity. Their natural growth process is encouraged. We make it easier for them to live the laws of life: cooperation, contribution, self-discipline, integrity, and to discover and live true to the highest and best within them." So Amanda and I hope that you don't just take these slips and disregard them after class, but you actually take them and find ways to make them become reality in your life, and use them just as daily reminders of ways that you can deposit this into your emotional bank account and help build strength and trust within your relationships. Is there any questions?
Was there any major takeaways that you guys had during this practice for this experience? Jenna?
I think it's really great to break down the steps to realize that there are actually like, incremental things that you can do in your relationships with your friends or family to improve that relationship. And I really like how we think of it as deposits, that you do get a return on that investment to some extent. And I think that's what we want to realize.
Any other final thoughts, questions?
Feedback?
More feedback, but I just appreciate you sharing your personal experience with like being vulnerable and stuff. Still, it's an important part to it.
Thank you.
Cubby does that a lot.
Some feedback. I think these are great because I can take one that I want to work on the most and stick it somewhere where I can see it. And then it's a constant reminder of taking a deposit.
Which of these 6 deposits is most challenging for each of you individually?
I think for me it's clarifying expectations, because a part of me is a really big people pleaser. And so I try to just be like, oh, like whatever you expect in this relationship, I'm cool with, but deep down I'm like, actually not. So explicitly saying like expectations or being more bold in that way, I think is really difficult for me to be like, hey, like I really care about you, but also like this is where I'm at with our expectations. So it's definitely something that I read and I was like, I should probably work on that.
The last one.
Well, thanks Amanda for sharing what you did in regards to that.